Welcome to the Museum of Aquarium and Pet History. Today we have a big one. We have one of the absolute largest companies in the pet industry for decades and decades. We have, believe it or not, Hartz Mountain. And notice I'm wearing kind of the orange Hartz Mountain shirt to go with the color that they actually trademarked or copyrighted. So from a friend of mine had told me that Hartz Mountain and IBM were the only two companies that actually got a copyright on a color for a specific item that they were manufacturing. So that was actually pretty cool. So let's get into it. Hartz Mountain. It turns out that a gentleman by the name of Max Stern, who was in Germany, this was after World War I. Germany was in a free fall economically. The war had ended. Economically, they were in incredibly bad shape. A lot of people were leaving, and Max decided he wanted to immigrate to the United States. Now, he had loaned a friend some money, and so he went to his friend and says, "Hey, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to immigrate to the U.S. You need to pay me back." And the friend said, "I don't have the money, but I do have a couple thousand canaries, singing canaries." So Max said, "Okay, I'll take them." So he took the singing canaries, went down to the docks, and was going to get on the Hamburg American steamship lines. And he went to them and he negotiated that, "Hey, I'm going to ship all these canaries with you and pay the shipping rate, but I want free passage because I have to be, in the hull of the ship taking care of the canaries." So they did. The Hamburg steamship lines gave him free passage to the United States. And with his few thousand canaries, came in 1926 at age 28, immigrated to the U.S. Now, he gets to the U.S., he doesn't know anybody, he doesn't speak a lick of English, no English, and he doesn't have a place to live. So he gets off the ship and thinks, well, what am I going to do? But he's amazingly entrepreneurial and thinks, okay, I've got these canaries, I'm going to hit the pet shops and start selling them. And that's what he did. He hit some small pet shops, started selling the canaries. Even though he didn't speak English, he figured out a way. Got some money, which probably allowed him to rent a place, to stay, that kind of thing. But he didn't like really selling the canaries like piecemeal to all these different little pet shops. He thought, I just need to sell all of them to one store. So he found John Wanamaker Department Store, and that was in Astor Place in Manhattan. It was the city's largest pet shop. And he went in there and sold the entire rest of his lot of canaries, which was pretty amazing. So think about it. Immigrates to the U.S., doesn't speak English, doesn't have a place to live, all these things up against him, but yet he sells his canaries and finds a way. So I'm amazed by that. So in 1932, his customers included Macy's, Sears, Grant's, Woolworths, Kresge. And Kresge, I think, was Kress, which became Walmart, I'm pretty sure. So at that time, in 1934, 2 years later, he was the largest livestock importer in the U.S. and started making bird food under the Hartz Mountain brand. All of you have seen this. This little Hartz Mountain can is probably the most popular can you'll ever see sold used on different various vintage sites. I'm sure originally it was maybe a nickel or a dime. This one says 20 cents on it. But so this is what he started with food like that. Now, I do want to show you one thing. This is something from the museum, and it's an artifact that we bought, and it is Hartz Mountain bread for canaries, and it's in English, okay? So if Max came over here and started Hartz Mountain, I'm thinking this possibly, and I would need to confirm this with someone at the Hartz Mountain company, the original, people there, that this was one of Max's first original canary foods, that he sold it as like a canary bread, and it came in a little box, a cigar box, and it has a picture of a canary in a bird cage, and it has the Hartz Mountain bread and has another canary over here. It's actually really cool. So I'm hoping I can confirm the provenance on this, that this actually is something from the original Hartz Mountain in the 1920s. It certainly looks 1920s to me. So that's in the museum artifact collection, and I just thought I would show that to you. It's very interesting. So in 1959, something happens. Now Max was in partnership with his brother. His brother came over, and so he did work with his brother, and eventually he bought his brother out. I'm trying to say when that was, but he bought his brother out for $8 million, which was a lot of money back then. And let's see, in 1959, Hartz Mountain generated $18 million in sales, which in today's money is $200 million. So can you imagine that? 1959, 18 million in sales, which is equivalent to 200 million today. And he bought his brother's interest in the company out for $8 million. And then he brought his 3 sons into the business, with the rock star son being Leonard. Leonard Stern, I don't know how much of a pet person Leonard Stern was, but he was a businessman on steroids. I mean, he was a crazy, phenomenal, take no prisoners piranha of a businessman. And he really took Hartz Mountain to a level that was just completely unexpected. And what they did was they decided, of course, that mass market was where they really wanted to be, even though they did sell into the pet industry, but they really wanted the mass market business. So they made these racks, that had everything on them, and they diversified their line. They didn't just do bird stuff. They started doing turtle stuff. They started doing aquarium stuff. They started buying smaller companies. One of those smaller companies was Long Life. And, one of the things they say in the history was they were buying companies that were basically failing. And I don't believe that Long Life was failing. I really don't. I've read the history on the man who was a hobbyist who started Long Life, and I think Long Life was just fine. They weren't failing. I think that Long Life just basically was tired, and he was old, and he wanted to sell. So they bought it, and they basically turned it into Stern Co., which was one of their other brands. So they had a family brand like Hartz Mountain for birds. They had Stern Co., which was for fish and for some of the other products that they did. So we get on to the 1950s. His 21-year-old son starts in 1959. That's Leonard. And he wanted to expand the lines into dogs, cats, fish, hamsters, etc. And that's what they did. They expanded the line. They really revolutionized the pet industry with the fact that they did these all-encompassing display racks. They went into these mass market stores, and remember, back then, whether it be grocery or whether it be, a Woolworths or whatever, they loved silent salesmen, and that's what these racks were. They were silent salesmen. They would go in there and say, look, we have everything on this rack. You don't have to have a salesman sell it. We put it in your store, and it will sell itself. It's a silent salesman. And that's really how they got into so many big department stores. There was some controversy. A lot of smaller companies that came and tried to break into those big department stores had a really hard time. Hartz had quite a monopoly on these big ones. So there was some infighting and issues and stuff, and everyone has a rough patch in their business. That happens. So that's something I won't really dive into too much. I mean, Hartz seemed to have weathered the storm and continue to go on. But in 1966, they decided to enter the real estate market with the construction of a 700,000 square foot industrial distribution facility. And that really changed Hartz. And this was all Leonard. I mean, Leonard is the one that really pushed for this, even though at one point when his brother left the company, his brother went into real estate, so I'm sure that had some kind of influence on Leonard. But Leonard really wanted to dive into real estate, and probably one of the best buys he ever bought was Meadowlands, and it was really swampland that was 10 miles outside of Manhattan, give or take. And he bought it, and he turned it into industrial warehouses, businesses, you name it, apartments. So that was huge for them. I mean, it really catapulted him into being the wealthiest man in the pet industry at the time, because he really was, and probably still is. I mean, the wealthiest company today is, of course, Nestle in the pet industry. Nestle is huge and has very long arms in all kinds of things. Nestle Crunch bars, candy, foods, you name it. But Hartz at the time was the first billion-dollar company in the pet industry. And that happened sometime in the 1960s. 1969 is when Leonard purchased the 1,250 acres in the town of Secaucus, only 6 miles from downtown Manhattan. So I was wrong. It wasn't 10, it was 6. In 1980, he bought a home carpet cleaning business. 1985, they diversified into publishing. Probably not the best idea, because I think they did get out of that. But they purchased the Village Voice, the LA Weekly, Seattle Weekly, and several more with a total circulation of 900,000 and 1,000 employees. How do you wrap your head around 1,000 employees? So I don't know. But he did get out of that one. In 1990, Leonard welcomes the third family generation to the Hartz Mountain empire, sons Emmanuel and Edward Eddie Stern. I think probably are still there, of course. Leonard is actually still alive, and Leonard is 86 years old today. So happy birthday. Is it day your birthday, Leonard? Well, 86. Congratulations. That's a great run so far. I think you're going to make it to 100. In 1994, Hartz acquired Wardley's and L&M, which was really a birdseed company. Wardley's they acquired because he was friends with the owner, and they had the machinery to manufacture flake food, so they wanted that. They still have Wardley's today, and I think they still have L&M as well. 1996, he entered the hospitality business, acquiring hotel properties in New York and New Jersey. And in 2023, the fourth generation, which is amazing for any company to get to 4 generations, the fourth generation of the Sterns enter the family business. That's Avery Stern and Zara Stern. So the first 2 women to come into the big Hartz Mountain Stern empire. And even though they had spun off Hartz Mountain, they had sold it in 2000 to J.W. Childs and Associates in a managed leverage buyout. It was eventually then sold again to the Sumitomo Corporation of America, which is a global trading firm in consumer goods. And it was sold in 2005 to them for $319 million. Again, when I talk about the fourth generation of the Sterns and the 2 women that came in, fewer than 5% of family-held businesses make it to the 4th generation. So that's pretty impressive. Although, again, they had sold it in 2000. They'd sold the pet part of it, but not the real estate part of it and all the other companies that they had. They still had a lot of different little auxiliary companies, the carpet cleaning business. And, I know they got rid of the publishing, but they have long arms. I mean, they had apartment complexes, you name it. And they were all Hartz Mountain, Hartz Mountain Industries, Hartz Mountain this, Hartz Mountain that. But the Hartz Mountain pet food was sold in 2000. 1962, just to back up, is when they did take the company public. Leonard's dad really didn't want to take it public because they didn't want so much interference with how to run the business. So it took a lot of convincing from Leonard to convince his dad, Max, to take the business public. So that was interesting. In 1970, they claimed that Max and Leonard Stern controlled roughly 1/3 of the nearly 900 million pet supply business throughout the companies in the U.S. They had 1,200 SKUs, which is 1,200 product items, a range which included products for birds, fish, hamsters, dog, cats, etc. In 1972, Leonard was in full control of the company and diversified into real estate, as I had talked about. In 1970, he took the company private again. They took it out of public and took it private again. And Hartz Mountain Industries today has 260 buildings totaling 260 buildings totaling 45 million square feet. So absolutely incredible that they had done so incredibly well. Now, Hartz Mountain, where does that come from? Hartz Mountain is a district in Germany that has famous canary breeders and has for decades. Canaries come from the Canary Islands. And they were really Spain really was the first country to sort of embrace canaries as pets, start sending them all over the world, including Germany. But Germany was the first really to start selectively breeding canaries. And the Hartz Mountain District was very famous for that. Now, what's interesting to me is Hartz is spelled H-A-R-T-Z, but in Germany, the Hartz Mountain District is spelled H-A-R-Z. There's no T in it. So I went to Alex, our German translator. I said, Alex, how come Hartz Mountain spells it with a T, but it's really in Germany spelled with no T? And he said, well, I'm not positive, but I think what it is that the correct pronunciation is Hartz with a T. And they put that T in there so Americans would pronounce it correctly. And I thought, that's pretty cool, actually. So if you go to Germany looking for Hartz Mountain, the district, leave the T out because it's not there. It's H-A-R-Z, Hartz Mountain, pronounced with a T, though. So that's that. One thing that Leonard did that was really cool is in 1986, he was chairman of Homes for the Homeless, which served over 63 homeless families and over 1,200 homeless children. So he did do some philanthropy that was really wonderful, and I just want to make sure that I credit him for that. The other thing that I want to say that's really interesting, and this is from my good friend Marshall Myers. Basically, Leonard, in 1969, wanted to take on the airline industry because they had a 300% premium assessed on live animal shipments. And Leonard's like, this is nonsense, a 300% premium on live animals. And they were, again, at that time, they were importing tons of canaries. So Leonard hires Marshall Myers to fight the airlines for this premium. And of course, Marshall won and got it down to a tiny amount. But then what happened was John Wilson from Wilson Pet Supply, Alan Levy from Wardley's, Bern Levine from Pet Farm, and Claude Kissin. I think he had a fish farm, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, those people got together and they had their own problems. So they decided to also go to Marshall since he's done such a good job with the airlines and the premium that they assessed. So they went to him and they said, hey, we need to do this animal organization called PJAC, the Pet Industry Joint Advisory Council. That's what they called it at the time. The name's changed since then. And they took all the problems and paperwork they had and went to Marshall's office, dropped it there and says, you're now in charge of PJAC. And Marshall wrote on there, he says, APMA, which was the American Pet Product Association, with virtually no notice, moved PJAC into my office in the middle 70s. It was a result of the airline rate reduction to 10% on warm-blooded and 0% on cold-blooded that resulted in my inheriting the pet industry, biomed research, zoo, animal acts, wildlife industries creation, etc. And he says, I can't believe I'm still at it 5 decades later. And thank you, Marshall. Thank you for everything you've done for the pet industry. And 5 decades, hey, kudos. That's great, man. We all hope we can make it to the big 100. So a couple other things before I sign off on Hartz Mountain. At first I thought that Hartz always had this color scheme, the orange with the black lettering. But at one part in their career, they had the reverse. They had a black with orange lettering. I call it the Halloween Hartz, because it looks like Halloween, basically. And if you find these are incredibly rare. These are the only 4 I've found in 40 plus years of collecting these items. And I can't say that they're the original first products that they made because there's aquarium products in there. And they didn't really start aquarium products till a little bit later, probably the 1940s or right around there. So I can't tell you the year. I hope someday if Leonard calls me, he could tell me exactly when they did the black scheme, how long it lasted, and they probably went like, oops, we should go back to the color scheme that everybody knows. So that is the black scheme. And just to show you like some of the crazy products they had, they had a foot balm for canaries, tiny little foot balm. They had these great Art Deco bottles with bird bitters, pep tonic, vitamin tonic, and this one here is a bird wash to wash your bird. Very cool. They had all kinds of mite cures. They had cuddle bones, of course. You always give your bird a cuddle bone. Biscuits for your birds, little biscuits, egg biscuits, charcoal for your birds, give them good breath so they can give you little kisses. They have these little kits here. Again, they love making these kits. This was a little parakeet kit. 2 different models, one where the parakeets aren't looking at each other and one where the parakeets are kissing each other. They have all kinds of foods, conditioning food to condition them for breeding. Over here you've got, these are the little cages from Hartz Mountain that they would have given you at a store if you bought a canary. So if you bought a canary, they would give you one of these to basically take your canary home. Here's another box where you could take your pet home. Like if you had a mynah bird, they're showing a little alligator. So if you bought an alligator, if you bought a little, that looks like a squirrel almost, and a little small cockatiel type bird. Here's the package that people love, the silver aquarium gravel, which I think we'll make a poster of and offer that on the website. And then you've got, of course, shrimp, daphnia, which is for fish, tropical fish food. And this is when they went out there in the 70s and started experimenting with a couple other different colors. Turtle foods, both the older one with the black on orange, and then the newer one, newish one. Later turtle food, old turtle food in a box. This is like a cigarette box or a match box, and it's got the food still in it. Ew. So that's probably flies actually. What did they put in these foods? Is it flies? Because usually they use dried flies for turtles. That was, ant eggs and dried flies. I was right. So combination of ant eggs and dried flies. And I don't know where you get a huge amount of ant eggs today, but flies are very popular for feeding reptiles and turtles. Then of course we've got all the different fish foods that they did. And one last thing, I think I had showed you this. This is a piece of porcelain, and it was made by a local artist. Well, local, I should say. She's in California. And she makes these kind of whimsical everyday items like toothpaste, cat food, not just pet, but all different kinds of things. And let me just quickly, her name is Karen Shapiro, and she is, where you could find these is at the Winfield Gallery. It's WINIFILD gallery.com. And Chris is the owner. It's that's the agent for her. She does wonderful things. She calls them pop icons, and she's non-apologetic. She just loves doing this kind of stuff. This is her career in life, is making these. And I had her make this one for Hartz Mountain, which I thought was very, very cool. So that, I think, is everything that I have on Hartz Mountain. Just a crazy company. And I think today, I'm trying to think, I had here what they're worth today, which is just an ungodly amount of money. 8.1 billion. Billion with a B. 8.1 billion. Yes, that's because of all the real estate holdings that they have. But it's amazing. So Leonard, let's do lunch one day, okay? I'd love to do it. And again, I thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you next week where we'll start back up with the 5-minute videos, okay? Have a wonderful weekend. Oh, last thing, almost forgot. Next week we're at Super Zoo. So if any of you guys in the pet industry are going to Super Zoo, which is the big pet industry trade show for the pet trade only, if you're going there, please stop by. We have a booth. We're pretty close to the ZooMed booth, and we're right across from the Triple L booth. So we do have a booth. Be sure to stop by. And if any of you old timers are going to be there, stop by and let us interview you so we can definitely document your life in the pet trade. So again, thank you for coming. I'll see you again next week.